10 times test. Yeah, let's keep saying test over and over again. Can you actually hear me? Yeah, is anything coming there? Continue. So I can already start the presentation, right? There's a bunch of slides at the beginning that I have no idea what they are. So
Soweit? Good. Welcome everybody to today's April 2023 meetup. The .NET meetup here in Vienna. As always, it's organized by .NET Devs AT. It's Karl, Martin, Stefan, and me. We are a non-profit organization. It's all about sharing .NET knowledge with these events in Vienna and worldwide via the streams. We have a website there you find all the links to our YouTube channel, Twitch channel, Twitter, and also to our Slack channel. If you want to watch old recordings of our meetups. Thank you all for joining here at the location as Evolit and also in stream. Hi. And I also want to thank our sponsors and first Evolit for the location today. And with that, I'm handing over.
So thank you very much for being here, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talking to you. My name is Daniel Freiberger. I'm Managing Director of Evolit, responsible for business development, and I'm working here since, I would say, 2 months or something. Good idea.
First time that we're using this stuff.
That's okay. So I started here at the 1st of February, so it's also brand new for me being here. So please excuse me or apologize if I'm not doing the perfect value proposition of Evolit today. But I'm doing my best and trying it. What is Evolit? Who is Evolit? Who are we? So I would say we are a startup stylish IT company doing tailor-made software only. So meaning that the most of the software that we are doing is based on .NET technology or Java stack. We started in 2011 as a kind of spin-off of the Austrian Railway with some people. The initial founder from the company in 2011 is still on board and is the second managing director. We have 2 office locations. One is here in Vienna, where the most of the people are located. So I would say 95% of the people are here in Vienna. And then we have a second location in Poprad, which is in Slovakia, where we are trying to also get some people on board. It's not a typical nearshoring location as maybe some larger companies are doing it to get a better cost effect or something like that. So we are really trying to hire their highly skilled people, which means that this doesn't provide us a really cost benefit. So, and this is also brings me back to what we want to do here. So we are really a kind of nerdish company. So they are really cool and high skilled people. It was also learning from me. I came from a large company where I would say everything is a little bit slower, and here we are still in startup mode. I already said that we were founded in 2011, so we had a journey over the last years, and I see that the PowerPoint got messed up here. But nevertheless, our idea is that we have the market-leading position here in Austria for the mobility and infrastructure sector. So this is our focus that we have here. Looking at our value chain, so what do we want to do? I would say that the main focus here is that we are doing really development. This means web development and backend development. Of course, we are doing also some UX, UI design. We are doing some consultancy, architecture consultancy. And in the end, most of our customers also want to do some maintenance with us, so application maintenance, either on cloud stack, Microsoft Azure or AWS or on-premise. So this is the whole value chain that we are doing. So we are a development company, to summarize that, working for large customers. So there are already there are some brands that you might know. For example, the Austrian Railway. There is Verbund. Then we have also the Austrian Institute of Technology as one of our customers that we're working closely together. So if you want to get some more insights for Evolit, you can either ask me, or it's also David here who can answer your questions or have some chat about Evolit insights afterwards. And yeah, I wish you very, I would say, I wish you a very interesting session now. And now the stage, I would say, is yours.
So good, thank you. Yeah, I also want to thank our other sponsors, Rubicon and Tieto. They are supporting us financially and to have the equipment for the streams and everything. And also thank you for JetBrains. They are sponsoring us with a giveaway. We have to give away a 12 months product license. I will give away one here at the location that works. The first who comes to me after the talk, who wants it, gets it. And the stream had to work a little bit harder. They need to type hashtag JetBrains in the chat. And at the end of the talk, we do a raffle, and then the person gets one of the keys. Quick some news from the community. What we found, one is our meetup is part of the .NET Foundation, and the .NET Foundation would like that we tell you about the .NET Virtual User Group. The user group on meetup.com, where a lot of other meetup organizers are publishing, announcing their events that are remote. So if you need more .NET content, go there. Some interesting events. What we found is tomorrow the Munich.NET meetup has a talk about Azure OpenAI. It's a remote meetup. So if you want to join on May 3rd, our friends from the Unity 3D meetup have a talk about game stability and AI-assisted development. I think that's also a remote-only meetup. And on May 12th, there's the Global Azure Austria conference, what is also remote only. Good. Yeah, some events in the future. For the people that are new here, and I see a lot of new faces, or I'm bad in remembering. We also recommend also some .NET content creators. So first is our own Stefan, who is doing streams somehow regularly about .NET tools at the moment. Then we have Claudio Bernasconi, is a Swiss content creator, does a lot of entry-level .NET stuff. And we have Nick Chapsas, who does more mid to end level content. If you have other .NET content creators that you like, please let us know that I can make the list bigger or swap them out to make some differences in the intro. And with that, I'm done. And now it's Roman's place to talk. And it's about all .NET MAUI and the future of multi-platform development. So your stage.
How many slides are there?
Where are your slides?
After this, but...
After this. You put
Okay, here we go. Hallo Wien und hallo alle Leute online. Mein Name ist Roman Jasek und ich bin aus Tschechien hier gekommen. Mein Deutsch ist nicht sehr gut, also let's continue in English. Okay, so this is my name, and I am a Microsoft MVP from Czech Republic. I'm originally actually from Slovakia, so when I heard that the company is also has a branch in Slovakia, then I was very happy about it. I work at a small Czech company called RIGANTI, and I'm a .NET developer. We are a .NET house, so we do everything with .NET. I focus on mobile development, so Xamarin and nowadays MAUI. If you want to ask any questions, feel free to raise your hands, and we can ask them even throughout the presentation, or if you want to save them for the end, we can do that as well. Also, if you want to ask online, just write them, and Stefan will read them to me. All right, so let's get to the topic. .NET MAUI. So what the MAUI stands for is Multiplatform App UI. And what we will be talking about is development for multiple platforms and developing applications. So these 4 platforms are the main focus for .NET MAUI. So on the mobile end, we have Android and iOS. On desktop, we have Windows and Mac. I wanted to ask you a question. Who here has done any development in Xamarin or MAUI? All right, quite a few people. And who has done some other XAML-based framework like WPF or Silverlight or, yeah, okay. So most of you, yeah, who remembers Silverlight? Hi. Come on, we all loved it. Okay, most of us. So I won't be going into the details of XAML, into what the language is like. I will be talking mostly about principles, and we'll take a look at some code, but I won't be talking about all the controls and stuff. I just wanted to know if the audience is correct. I believe you are. Right. So what MAUI brings is these 4 platforms, as I said. The change from Xamarin is that we now have desktop development in here. There were some implementations for desktop that were experimental or community-based. Nowadays, we have finally some official support for Windows and Mac. There's also a version for Linux. I know it's a very popular question, so I will answer it right away. It's a community-based thing. There is no direct support from Microsoft, so maybe at some point I will talk about one option at the end that may come to Linux sooner than the rest, but we'll see about that. I don't have any official information, so no words on Linux so far. You can use MAUI to develop for all these platforms. You can deploy to emulators, simulators. You can deploy to real devices. So you can use all of this. And let's see what MAUI actually is. So we have the APIs for developing for every single platform. In Xamarin, it was Xamarin iOS, Xamarin Android, and so on. Now we have .NET for Android and .NET for iOS and .NET for macOS. And on Windows, we have something called WinUI. Actually, there should be a number there. It's called WinUI 3. There was also WinUI and WinUI 2, which were completely different things. Microsoft and naming scheme is kind of wild, as you probably know as .NET developers. So this is WinUI 3 that we are talking about. There's also the common base class library. So this is shared for all the platforms and all the implementations. And there are 2 runtimes on Android and iOS and Mac. I will move to the side so that you can see it. On this non-Windows platform, you use Mono for running the application. And on Windows, you can choose WinRT or you can choose Win32. So it can be a full desktop application with all the capabilities. There we go.
Talk about Mono. It was developed in Linux originally.
Yeah.
So why is there no official support for Linux?
Okay, I will.
It doesn't make sense in my opinion, right?
I will repeat the question for the stream. So the question is, why is there no official support for Linux if Mono was developed for Linux? I believe Mono was developed for Mac mostly because Miguel de Casa was Apple person, or like he really likes Apple. But yeah, it definitely supports Linux as well. You can run all of this stuff on Linux, but the issue is the UI layer because as we will be talking about, what MAUI actually is calling into native platforms and calling in and creating the controls the native way. On Linux, this is not official information. I'm not a Microsoft employee, so just take my opinion here. On Linux, there are multiple implementations on how you can create windows, how you can draw UI, and it would be quite costly to maintain different implementations for GNOME and KDE and all the Linux distributions and different styles of drawing. So I believe this is the answer why Microsoft is not putting so much money into this. I don't have any official statement on this, so this is what I think. Yeah. Right. So about the UI, well, there are platform-specific ways to define UI. So if you are an Android developer, you probably know activities and fragments and AXML, these native ways to create UIs. If you are an iOS developer, you probably know storyboards. And if you are a Windows developer, you probably don't know WinUI, but you probably know WPF or some other framework that is pretty close to it. You can use this knowledge in here as well, so you can define the UI the native way if you prefer that for a specific platform. And in terms of code, you have the access to all the APIs that are there on those platforms. However, you don't use Java or you don't use Swift on those platforms, you will use .NET, but you have support for those platforms. You can do native way of creating UI. You can do what you are used to if you want that part. If you, however, don't want to deal with every single platform on its own, you can create a common UI where you use XAML for development, so the language that we know from other Microsoft-based frameworks and also non-Microsoft-based frameworks like Uno or Avalonia. So some third-party frameworks use XAML as well. And you can define the UI in one way and launch it on every single platform. What happens on the platform? Each platform is a bit different. That's what you need to keep in mind. Each platform behaves differently once you run the code, once you compile it. On Android, your C# code compiles into intermediate language, and so that gets shipped with the application. And there's the JIT compiler, which does the compilation as you go. And you get all the stuff that you are used to from all the .NET development. So you get intermediate language, you get all the things that you know from server development, from web development. So on iOS, this works a bit differently. On iOS, there are some limitations on what you can execute, what you can do on the runtime. So they couldn't put JIT in there and execute the code as it goes. The way that it works on iOS is that you do ahead-of-time compilation. So you precompile your C# code into a binary code, and you ship that with the application. These two approaches have different benefits. Each one has its own pros and cons. On Android, you usually will deal with startup time, so it starts a bit slower. On iOS, you will deal with the application size, because when you precompile it, it creates larger packages. So on Android, you get worse startup time, but smaller application. On iOS, you get great startup time, but bigger application. So this is just how it's done. So you can measure it finally, I was just talking about this a few weeks ago, that you have tools to measure the startup performance and see what actually takes time. And you have methods to deal with that. But this is what you need to keep in mind, that there are two different ways that this behaves. And then we come to desktop. So what's the story here? On macOS, MAUI uses something called Mac Catalyst, which is a way for Apple to run iOS applications on Mac. I believe this was first done because they wanted to fill up their Mac store with applications written for iPads, because they already are written for larger screens, and they wanted to get them to Mac. So this is a technology where you can take an iOS app and actually run it on Mac. What it gives us on top of this, not just running the application, but we get access to Mac APIs. So if you are thinking about iOS development, you are quite limited to what you can do. You cannot access the file system directly. You cannot access some low-level APIs. You cannot access serial ports or some networking stacks and so on. But on macOS, you can do this. So by using this technology, you can actually create an iOS application that has these capabilities on Mac. So by this, you are creating actually an iOS application that runs on Mac and has some additional capabilities. On Windows, there is something called WinUI library or Windows App SDK. You will encounter these two terms, and they are used interchangeably. So sometimes this will be referred to as WinUI 3, which is the UI layer, and sometimes as Windows App SDK, which is like the APIs for accessing stuff. On Windows, this is a full framework for creating applications. This is a new thing. This is not WPF. This is not UWP. This is a completely new beast. And it was basically launched with MAUI. So last year, it launched at the same time. And they are still working on it. I'm not sure who will actually use this on its own. But if you want to know what your capabilities are in MAUI, you can take a look at WinUI 3 and see what it's capable of. Because not everything is surfaced to the MAUI level, but you can reach below, which we'll talk about next. So let's put it in a bigger picture. If we are talking about MAUI, then there is the common library. So this is the base that is shared for all the .NET development. You know this from other frameworks as well. On each platform, there is a runtime that will actually run the application, execute the commands. So on non-Windows platforms, Mono is used, and on Windows, Win32 is used, basically. On top of this, on top of the base class libraries, you get specific APIs for those platforms. So you have access to .NET for Android, .NET for iOS, .NET for Mac, and WinUI. Yeah.
Is it still version 6 or 7? Is this a typo?
Oh, sorry, there's, 7, definitely. I should just remove the number from there so that, that is a typo. That is an older slide, so yeah, thanks for the question. All right, so you have the platform-specific APIs, and on top of that, you have .NET MAUI, which is the layer above this which unites everything and which gives you access to the common stuff, common controls, common layouts that you can use across all these platforms. And on the very top of this, your app code lies. So if you are developing an application, you can reach into any of these levels. You can just use .NET MAUI, where you have all the common stuff. So you have your buttons, you have your labels and lists and so on in there. And these will use the underlying layer for creating the UI and creating all the screens and navigation and so on from those platforms. You can also reach a level below. So if there is something that is not supported in the common layer, you can use the platform-specific API. So if there is something that is specific only for Android or only for Windows, you don't need to rely only on the .NET MAUI layer, but you can also go a level below and code that directly on that platform. And so on. You can obviously use the BCL because that is common for all the .NET world. All right. So what is actually the .NET MAUI, the layer that was on the previous slide? It's a collection of controls. It's a layout engine that you can use for creating your pages and laying your controls around. It supports navigation between pages. It supports 2 ways of navigation, actually. It provides you with customizable handlers, which is who has done any, what are they called? The specific stuff for the platforms in Xamarin was done differently. Here, if you want to do the renderers, so who has done any custom renderers for Android or iOS or so? Yeah. Okay. You probably remember that it was a mess. Yeah. So this was completely replaced by something called handlers. You can still use your renderers if you need them. There is support. There is backwards compatibility for this. So you can take your code and use it as is. But the new preferred way of creating this custom stuff for each platform is called handlers. It is written quite differently, but you still have all the capabilities that you had in renderers. It's just different parts of your code where you will write it. And you have access to all the native features like GPS, accelerometers, Bluetooth, and so on. So you can reach down into that and just touch it directly. And there is also a graphics library called SkiaSharp for drawing 2D stuff. So if you are into game development or some graphical stuff, then you can create lines and shapes and put them on the screen. This is not something that I normally use for app development, but it's there, so you can do that. What changed from Xamarin days is that we don't have multiple projects now. Who remembers shared projects in Xamarin? Oh, quite a few people. Okay, so when I first saw this, I was weirded out because at the beginning in Xamarin we had the libraries and we had shared projects. And nowadays we are coming back to something similar to shared projects. It works differently. It's not the same. And it has much better support in Visual Studio. So you can actually switch between devices and emulators and different platforms directly in Visual Studio quite easily. And it's actually quite nice. I've been using it for the past few months, and it's a good way to do it. We also have better support for .NET Hot Reload. So you can change stuff while you're debugging your application, and it actually shows up. This was not the case in Xamarin, or not as much as here. Here it's working better from what I've seen so far. And if you remember Essentials, Xamarin Essentials, this was a separate library that you needed to put another NuGet to get. Now this is directly into .NET MAUI, so there is .NET MAUI Essentials, but it's already, you don't even need to reference it. It's part of the .NET MAUI ecosystem, and it's just in a separate namespace, so you can use it directly when you create an application. Okay, so I already said that there is one project common for all the platforms. So what if we want to do something different for each platform? We actually got some gains from this by sharing all the stuff with images, fonts, splash screens, and so on. If you remember, in Xamarin, you had to put all this stuff into all the different projects, create different sizes, put it in the correct folders, and so on. Now you just drop an image into the folder, and it will create everything magically. So you don't need to worry about this. You just set the correct build type to it, and it will create all the different sizes for all the different platforms. That's a question there.
This works only properly for SVGs, also vector graphics. So how is this working for PNGs as example?
All right, so I will repeat. The question was that if this works only for vector graphics. I believe it works also for raster, but you need to put the largest one in there, and it will create the smaller ones when you compile the application. Okay. Right. So, and on top of this, on top of the shared code, you have platforms folder. So you have a folder there, and for each platform there is a folder underneath of it. And there's where the startup of your application is, there's where the main activity lies, there's where the app delegate for iOS is, and so on. And when you switch the build targets, then that platform folder will be taken into account. So not everything will be compiled for each platform. It will switch based on where the code is in which directory. And there is where the very platform-specific stuff goes. So if you have some permissions, then that gets defined differently for Android and for iOS. So that is not shared. You still have the info playlist file and the Android manifest and so on. So if you want to do something this platform-specific, then you still have that in there. That's another question. Yeah, no worries.
There's a difference between package manifest and app manifest. On Android, you have only one manifest, right?
Yeah.
Why do you need two manifests for Windows?
Package manifest, so I will repeat the question. What is the difference between package manifest and Android manifest? Package manifest is for Windows. So it's basically what you used in Universal Windows Platform. There was the package manifest, and this is for packaging the application for Windows. It has different properties. On Android, you have Android manifest. Did that answer the question?
No, why do I need two manifests? Package manifest and app manifest.
I believe the...
Well, it's identical, no? I mean, the name is the same of the package and the app, so why do I need two?
Why do you need two? I believe they have different properties and different structure. There could be one meta file that would create these ones, but if you are packaging the application, if you're creating the application for the specific platform, you actually need to have that file in there so that it compiles for the platform. Maybe it could be done dynamically, but it's not. So maybe there's some issue underlying. I'm not sure. I don't know. Yeah. I didn't really hear so I can't repeat it. Okay. Maybe we can talk about it after the session. Yeah. Okay. All right. So what happens in the application startup? Something that is new and that is very welcome, at least from me, is that there is built-in dependency injection and that you have .NET generic host. So if you used ASP.NET or if you used some of these newer ASP.NET Core, let's put it that way, or is it called ASP.NET nowadays or .NET? Yeah, well, I don't know. I don't know anymore. After .NET 5, 6, yeah, well. So if you use that, you are used to, you have a builder where you put your dependencies and you run build where some application comes out of there and you run start. So this is what you get in MAUI as well. So finally, we are in this .NET ecosystem, .NET world, and we have dependency injection, not those weird attribute-based dependencies in Xamarin where you were creating it very differently from the rest of the world. So where you start is something called the MAUI program class. This is where you build your application. This is where you put your dependencies, and this is where you actually run the build command. And this creates an instance of a MAUI app class. Then you have the app class, which has its own XAML file where you have some resources or some global stuff that you need in the whole application. And it has its code behind file where you manage stuff that is connected to application initialization. You have methods like on start, on resume, on sleep, and so on. So what happens to your application goes into the app.xaml.cs file. On top of that, you have a separate starting point for each platform. So this is still present here. It's in the platform-specific folder, and you have your own main application or program or app.xaml.cs. It depends on what is typical for that platform. And you can find this in those platform folders. You will not need this very often, but sometimes you need to reach in there. Right, so what you need if you want to move from Xamarin to MAUI, or how would you approach this? There are two options. The first one is a manual process where you create a new project, you copy your code files over, you run a bulk rename for some namespaces. So there are like 2 that you need to change, and you need to update your dependencies. There's also a semi-automatic way, let's put it that way. There's a tool called .NET Upgrade Assistant, which is used for upgrading stuff within the .NET ecosystem. It's not only for the transition from Xamarin to MAUI, it's also for, let's say, MVC from the old ASP.NET to MVC in the new ASP.NET, and some other cases as well. So this is not a completely new tool. They've been using it for a while, but they are building in support for transitioning from Xamarin to MAUI. What you do is that you throw your Xamarin application in front of this tool, and you run it, and it will do some stuff automatically, and it will show you a bunch of stuff that you should do yourself. So it has actually quite good output into command line. So when you run it, you can actually see a lot of information from there. It's not just, okay, it runs and that's it, but it will show you the whole process. So when it's copying the file, when it's renaming the namespaces, and then when it's replacing or finding the dependencies, because it can update some of the dependencies automatically, the ones that they know of, where the NuGet package is very well known and it has a version for Xamarin and it has a version for MAUI, then they update it automatically. And then there are some that they know that don't exist for MAUI, so they will show you, oh, this one is an issue, so you need to solve it somehow. And it will show you some output for each one of them. Not everything is already implemented for MAUI. So this is my probably biggest pain point at this time. So we are waiting for some vendors to finish their transition to MAUI so that we can finally move all our applications to MAUI. And it's slowly getting there, but it will take, it depends. Some libraries are already supported very well. Most of the developers, like small developers, already moved to MAUI. So there is the issue of they are creating new stuff for MAUI, and if we are still on Xamarin, we cannot update to that. But some bigger libraries, like let's say Telerik or Syncfusion or DevExpress and so on, these huge software houses where they have lots of controls, lots of code. They are still working on it. Some controls are already ported, some are not yet. So it depends on what you use, if you can already upgrade or not. Right, so let's take a look at the code so that I don't spend my whole time in PowerPoint. So I have a sample application here. It's a little cookbook application. I have a version for Windows and version for Android as well, or well, basically for any platform, but this is what I'm going to show. So, right. This is on the left we have the Windows version, on the right we have Android version. I'll just try. Okay, this is actually running on a phone, so I hope it will not crash. No, it's fine. It's just sometimes the phone disconnects, and that's the major issue there. It doesn't have any issues with actually running there. Right, so what we have in here are a few pages. There are some recipes. There are some ingredients. The navigation is done differently on each platform. So, for example, this is something called the menu. Okay, now it's completely slipped my mind. What's the menu bar? Yeah, that's the name of it. And this is something that is specific for desktop development. So this was not in Xamarin before. This is a new control. This is the one that you use in all your desktop applications, so like file, about, and so on. And it behaves on each platform the native way. So on Windows, it will be part of the actual window of the application. On macOS, it will be in the system tray, so you have the options there within your system. And you just need to use it. It will behave this way automatically. You don't need to do anything. What's important is that it behaves this way. MAUI is not very self-conscious about how stuff is supposed to be drawn. It is using the native ways of drawing every control. So if you are using a button, it will look differently on Android, differently on iOS, differently on Windows. It will just use the native way of drawing a button. You don't need to do this. You don't need to style it for every single platform. This is the idea behind MAUI. It just calls into native APIs, and it uses those controls that are there on those platforms. So if you create the application, it will look native on each platform. You don't need to create it differently. If you want to style it the same way, you can definitely. You can create your own styles. You can create your own colors and animations and so on. But the default way is if you put it in there, it will look like a native control, so the user will be familiar with the design that is shown to them. That's the basic idea. And well, I have the navigation set up differently here. I have some controls set up differently. So we can see that if I go into the ingredients and I go into ingredients here, it has a different layout. It has different item templates used for the different platforms. So let's take a look at the code. First off, I would start in the MAUI program class. Can you see the code from behind? Or yeah? So I will increase the size a bit. Is this okay? Cool. Right? So what happens here? This is a MAUI program class, and it has a static method called createMAUIApp, from which we want to return an instance of the MAUI app class. So here we have the builder. You run or use MAUI app and use MAUI Community Toolkit if you want to do that. Community Toolkit is another set of controls that is developed by some people from Microsoft, some people from outside. It's not an official Microsoft package, but it's developed by a lot of the same people that are actually developing MAUI itself, so it is pretty much integrated. And you can configure your fonts, you can use app settings. So if you want to do some local settings for your application and change them from production and so on, you can do it just the way that you are used to from your .NET development from other platforms or other frameworks. And you can use dependency injection. So for example, here, I'm using the library called Scrutor, which is a nice way of registering everything that is based on some API or some interface or some class. And I can just automatically register all the classes that derive from something. Or I can do it manually. So you have your add singleton, add transient. You even have add scoped in here, but the scope is not very much used in this part of the .NET development. But you have your iService collection in here, so you can do all these different ways of registering dependencies. And well, this is a code that you probably know from all the different parts of .NET, so it's very familiar, and I'm really happy that we finally got to this point, because we've had this even in Xamarin, but we had to hack it in ourselves, and it was not that nice. So I'm happy that this is finally supported, and so we can use dependency injection just the way that you use it in other .NET frameworks. Okay, so this is the MAUI program class. And at the end, we get an instance of the MAUI app. Here we go. Here. And we just return it, and that's it. That's what we need to do in this method. So afterwards, we can move to the app.xaml CS file, where the actual start of the application happens. And this is where it starts to be interesting, because we can use dependency injection right in here. So directly in the app class, you can inject stuff into the constructor, and it will get resolved. You don't need to do anything to get this done. So you can use dependency injection right in here in the app constructor. And what we use it for in here is that we decide which shell should be used. Shell is top-level layout of the application. This was also available in Xamarin, but it was not used all that much. Nowadays, when you create a new MAUI application, you will end up with a shell as default. So shell is basically something that defines how your application behaves on the very top level. So in here, there is the shell for desktop, and this defines that we, on top of our application, have the menu bar, which has two pages in there and one button that will close the application. And in the Android file, on top of the application, we have a flyout, which is this way of setting the menu that will show on the left side when you move your finger, or you can use the hamburger button. And on the first page, we have the home page, where there are two tabs. So there is a recipes tab and there is the ingredients tab. And on the second page, there is just written the word settings. There is nothing there. But we can do this kind of navigation very easily. So this is all shell. So you can just create a shell that will give you the top-level navigation and put your pages into different parts of it. There's a question there? Sorry. Different platforms.
Yes, for example, API that calls from Android in
Windows. Okay. Let's see. I might have a sample for that in here. I'm not sure in this version, but yeah, it's here. So, okay. I need to I need to change focus because I was talking about the shell. So this is how you actually create these are the handlers. So if we are talking about the very specific platform stuff, then you can create your own handlers, which is from Xamarin that would be renderers. And this way you can go down to the platform specific stuff. Or you can do if-defs. So you can do if-def Android or if-def Windows, if-def iOS, and so on, anywhere in the code. And you can just put your platform specific stuff in there. So anywhere in here, I could use if Android, Windows, these are compiler directives. So in here, you can do Android-specific stuff. Underneath, you can do Windows-specific stuff. If you don't want to have a messy code and just have it inlined in your files, you can put it in the platform folders. So how would you approach this? There is an interface which specifies. So this is custom entry. I actually have a better example, but not in this version of the code. But I didn't plan to talk about this, but yeah, let's talk about this if you're interested. You specify that the custom entry has these two properties, text and text color. And then you need to have an implementation. So you have your, let's see. You have a control that this is still in the shared code. And the control can derive from any control that is already available in MAUI. This only derives from view, so this is just a generic view. And it implements the iCustom entry interface. Here, we are just creating bindable properties so that we can do binding into this. And then we have the custom entry handler, which actually does the work. So in here, we have something called a property mapper, which maps our properties to some methods, like what's supposed to happen if this property is set. So we have a method that will handle the text changes. So if the text gets set, then this method will be called. And in here, we have access to something called a handler, which is of type edit text. So here we specifically said that this is an Android thing, which is platform specific, and there it's called an edit text. So that's the entry for entering data. And in here, we can actually reach the Android control and set its properties. So here in the map text, we get the handler itself, and the handler has platform view in here, and here you have access to all the properties that are Android specific. Then we have another implementation for this custom entry handler that is in the Windows folder. I don't have the, sorry. I believe I only have the implementation for Android in here. But in the Windows folder, you would get implementation for Windows, where you would get different control as the platform view. So there it wouldn't be edit text, but it would be, I'm not sure what the one for Windows is called, but that would have its own set of properties that you can set, or methods and so on. And this way you can map every single of those properties that you specified in the interface to some methods. So if the text gets set, we need to do this. If the text color gets set, we need to do this to actually handle it in the platform-specific way. So in this way, you can do pretty much anything on those platforms, and you have access to all the controls and all their properties as they are done natively. Does this answer your question?
Explain how we can use different components, for example, Android components in Windows. But my question was about APIs.
APIs.
Yes. For example, if you want to implement some REST API.
REST API.
Yes, API.
Okay.
REST API.
Okay.
And when you implement in Android platform, and now you did it in Mac. Something like this, I want to call it. How we can.
Right. So I'll repeat the question if I understand correctly. So the question is,
Yes, yes.
how do we call REST APIs from Android and from Mac?
Yes, there is a service in your Android platform.
Yeah.
And do something for you. And now you want to use it in Mac platform.
Yeah. Okay.
How we can call it?
Actually,
Some attributes or something like this.
you mean the server side of this?
Yes, yes.
Oh, you don't build server side in MAUI. That's
Oh, it's just about.
it's for client applications.
Oh, so yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
If you want to call API, there is the HTTP client, and you just
Because you were using service collection.
yeah.
And so
Yeah, service collection.
that
Yeah, service collection is also on the server side, but yeah, we have it here as well. It's okay. Yeah. Okay, I get confused. Sorry, but the word API is used for multiple different things. So yeah, 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 no problem. All right, so I got probably a hole deeper than you actually wanted, but okay, let's let's get back on track. All right, so I was talking about shell. So this is how you create the top-level navigation. You can use shell, but you don't have to use shell. You can use navigation page, and you can use the push async and pop async methods, just how you are used to in Xamarin. This is just what you get by default, and you can choose to use it, or you can just delete it and leave just the way you used to. So it's completely up to you which navigation you use, if you use the navigation page or use shell. All right, so what else is in here? One cool thing that came with MAUI is something called .NET MAUI Blazor. Who uses Blazor in here? And which version? Do you use the server side or do you use the client side? Server. Client? Oh, there's one client. Wasn't. So client, all right? And server. Client. All right. So we got 3 people on WASM and 2 people on server. Oh, that's. I didn't expect that. Okay. When we use it, we use mostly the server part. But here there's a third one. So let's see. We have Blazor in MAUI. So if you want to use Blazor and create applications that way, then you can, and you can host them within MAUI. It's Razor, it's standard code that you would put into your Blazor application. There is nothing very specific about how you write it. It's hosted in a WebView control. It's very easy to set up. And it gives you something that is not in the server or the WASM part. This is run directly within the application. This doesn't use neither the server part and it doesn't use the WASM. So this gets executed right in the application, and it doesn't need a signal error for it to work. This is a third way of running Blazor. And what it does on top of this is it gives you access to all the platform APIs, because this is still a MAUI application. So you can do your Blazor application and call into the .NET code that is outside of the web client. So you can actually access all the stuff that you are not able to access from basic web. So you can call to your low-level APIs that you cannot use from the web part. So this is an interesting combination. And when I saw this first, I was like, why? But yeah, the answer is XAML is not for everyone. So not everybody likes to write their UI in XAML. So if you prefer Blazor, if you prefer web development, this is a valid use case. Also, this is a different way of creating our application. When I was talking about MAUI and how it calls the native stuff, it creates the buttons and labels and stuff just the way that it's on the specific platform. By using Blazor, you get the same APIs, the same UI. So when you create your responsive website, you can just host it inside of a MAUI application and you get the same UI. You don't get platform-specific controls. So if you prefer that, you can use Blazor for this. Also, it can be used in combination. So you can have parts of your application written in XAML and parts in this Blazor way. This can be useful if you have some controls that you have in the web development, but are not available for XAML or not available for MAUI specifically, and you want to use them in your application. You can mix and match these inside of your application. So you can put a control inside of your page that is written in Blazor, and the rest of the application can be in XAML. So you can mix this. This is new way of creating this. So you can mix and match. If we take a look at the application development that we have, I like this slide quite a bit. It's from Microsoft, so this is not my own, but I like to use it in these overview presentations. And if you take a look at what's in there, there are multiple ways of developing applications. It depends always on what you want to aim for. If you want your application to be easily distributed, then creating a website and sharing a URL is probably the easiest thing that you can do. If you need the performance and capabilities of your application, you can go the native way, or well, the .NET MAUI way, or other platforms. And there are multiple steps in between that you can choose, which will give you something and take something away. So it only depends on what your application needs to do and how your application needs to be run. And all of this can be done within the .NET ecosystem. So if you take a look at the .NET frameworks and all the stuff that we can do nowadays, a lot of it is very similar. The left side of this slide, so the desktop development, web, cloud, and mobile, is very similar nowadays. We always have the generic hosts in there. We have the dependency injection. We have all this startup code. We can share a lot of the code across our applications. You can do a lot of stuff that is shared also on the server and also the client. On the right side, there are the more specific use cases. With gaming, we've got Unity, which is a different beast within the .NET ecosystem, but you can still write in C# and do games. And you got those more specific use cases. But the ecosystem is quite widespread, so if you use .NET, if you use C#, you can build pretty much anything. Right. If you're interested in the code that I was showing, there's a bunch more stuff in there. So you can take a look at this site. I will probably share the slides with you somehow. Yeah. Okay. And yeah, I'll just skip this. I had this ready if we are moving faster than expected. But one more slide. We just had a conference focused on MAUI like 2 weeks ago. This was in Prague. And if you want to take a look, we had multiple speakers from all around the world, which are talking about MAUI, and they have nice blogs about MAUI. And Gerald is actually from the MAUI team, so he actually develops the stuff. If you want to take a look, there are recordings available. It's not free, but I have a special discount code for you. So if you want to take a look, it's we basically did the whole from the beginning of MAUI, like what it actually is, how you create layouts, how you create applications, through stuff like optimizations and customizations for different platforms and so on. So it was a 2-day conference. You can take a look if you want more information.
Which date was it?
Sorry?
Which date was it?
In Czech Republic, in Prague.
Yeah, the date.
The date, I think it was 23rd of March, something like that. Yeah, 2 weeks ago, or maybe 3. Yeah, something like that. Just a few days ago. All right, so if you have any more questions, are there any questions online?
There is Cups here is wondering, how do you usually solve platform differences like line endings, so CRLF handling on the different platforms?
Well, that's one thing that I didn't show, sorry. But yeah, this is a good question. You have multiple ways of addressing different platforms and different idioms on MAUI. If we take a look, I showed you in the code that I was switching the shells. So for phone, I was using a different shell, and for other platforms, I was using desktop. So if I was running this MAUI application on my watch, I would get the desktop UI. But yeah, let's not dwell on that. But if we go deeper in the code, we can take a look that there are multiple customizations in here. If I take a look at the list view page, then I can see that here in the collection view, I use something called onIdiom, which is a condition that gets handled for different idioms. In this case, this means phone, a desktop, or a tablet. And this, I can put different layouts in here. Same goes for item templates. The same goes for pretty much any condition or any attribute that you want to set. The same goes also for platforms. So instead of onIdiom, I could use onPlatform and do for Android, do this, and for iOS, do something else. In this way, you can modify pretty much anything in the XAML code for Android or iOS. And I'm replying to the person online, so let's look in the camera. And you can get your code to look like you want on that specific platform. Okay?
There is a follow-up.
All right.
Xamarin editor uses CR on Windows, UWP, and LF on Android, iOS. So yes, how would you do that, difference that in MAUI?
So carriage return and line feed, or?
Yeah.
If you have a multi-line text box, when you enter text multi-line, I would assume you get different line encodings.
Well, you can do the if-def conditions within code and process it on the backend differently, or I haven't encountered this issue specifically, but yeah, you can deal with this in the code behind if you need to address this. That's a very specific question for line feeds. Oh, there's a question from the audience.
It's about WebAssembly.
Oh, sorry.
Hey, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is about WebAssembly. We did a WebAssembly port 2 years ago with the platform. It was being the S.
Right.
So what's the strategy about WebAssembly? Because Microsoft is kind of committed to WebAssembly, but not when it comes to MAUI.
Oh, why does this? Oh, in terms of running MAUI in web browser. That's what you. Okay. Yeah, they address this, and that's again the same thing. They are calling some platform-specific APIs for drawing stuff. There is nothing native on the website, so they would need to create that themselves and maintain it. In terms of, yeah, you were asking about the Linux stuff. So I think that Blazor could be actually the answer for Linux, because there you only need to create the application and put a web view in there. And you can create, if you do the combination of Blazor plus MAUI, it's much easier for them to maintain it on Linux than to actually create the implementation with XAML. So I believe this will be the first thing that they do. In the other way around, where you want to host your MAUI application in the website, I have not heard anything about this specific. I don't know. I know that Uno does this and Avalon UI does this. So there are options, but yeah, there is no officially supported thing from Microsoft. And another question here?
Yeah. You've been talking about like Android and iOS, but how is it like with Wear OS 3? And I don't know what's the name for the iWatch or the Apple Watch. Are they also like, can you also say like,
Oh,
it's like smartwatch, but
yeah, there is an idiom. So I will repeat the question. So what's the situation for watches? So what's the situation for Apple Watch, and what's the situation for Wear OS, or what's the Google thing called? Not sure. There is an idiom for watch here. So probably I haven't tried it yet. One thing that supports it is Tizen. That is the platform from Samsung, and that's the platform that you may encounter on watches, but probably mostly on TVs and 3Gs and all these Samsung devices. And Samsung actually develops their own runtime or their own version of MAUI to run on those on Tizen. I'm not sure about Wear OS and Apple Watch OS, something called that way. Yeah. No, I don't know. Right? Okay. No more questions from online? Yeah. Okay. So I've answered everything. Thank you very much.
No, your slide was down, 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 down. That one.
That one.
All right. Good. Thank you for giving the talk. So, and for sure, I forgot something, as always. Every speaker at our meetups get one of our custom coasters. It's our logo, so all of you get one of those. Yeah, thank you all for joining here and on stream. Thanks again to our sponsors, Evolit for the location, and Rubicon and Tieto for financial support, and JetBrains for the product code. For the in-person stuff, first come, first serve to me. And for the stream, the raffle, Stefan is now doing the raffle. You don't see it, but the stream sees it, who is winning, in theory. You see now, turn the laptop and then see this nice animation. Cups here. So please write me a mail at this email address, and I will get you your JetBrains license. And with that, if somebody of you or your company want to host a meetup, please come to us, talk with us. We're always looking for a location to have the events. Next meetups, complete new. May 23rd, we have Rest Assured. Talk about Rest Assured. It's a library to test REST API endpoints by Bas. And probably in June, we will have a talk about core forms, where we don't have now yet a fixed location and time, but we have already topic. And in July, we have again will be something. For the people newest, we are now switching every 2 months. So we have every 2 months in-person event, and the other months we have remote-only events. It's still a little bit hard to find speaker for in-person events. But if you want to give a talk, come also to me. Yeah, and please spread the word that we're doing this meetups every month. More here, more on the stream, the more fun it is. And quick again, website with all the resources. And the last thing, as always, we want to improve these events always, and for that we need your feedback. And we have a nice feedback form with a nice big QR code, so it helps us to improve the events. So if you have 2 minutes time, please fill it out. Also, you on stream. You got the link in the chat. Good. And with that, I'll also say thank you, and we see us next month. Bye.